What up, friends? It's crawling in my skin, and today we're going to be reviewing Idols' newest album, Crawler. This is the fourth album from the Bristol-based post-punk and punk rock band Idols. It also comes just a year after Ultramono released back in 2020. Idols have always been a consistent and solid band, with Joy as an Act of Resistance being my personal peak for them, along with the peak of many others. However, Ultramono was a weird album that tried to find this middle ground between their harder previous work and a more melodic and minimalist sound. It ended up just feeling kind of bland and forgettable. However, with Crawler out now, I finally see that Ultramono was kind of a stepping stone of sorts, as the more moody and minimalistic tendencies of Ultramono are out in much fuller effect on this record. MTT 420RR is a great and ominous opener. To me, it kind of reminds me of how Preoccupations went in a more droney and minimalistic style with their latest few records. Joe's vocals are haunting and serious over the repetitive synth and guitar. It has the cadence of taking place right after the accident described in the lyrics, with a motorcyclist basically ramming into Joe at high speeds on a highway, which almost proved fatal for the cyclist. It starts the journey of Joe reflecting on the fragility of life and how he wants to use his time on Earth to basically lift up and empower other people to get past their struggles and addictions. The intensity is kicked up a notch on the wheel with booming bass and drums. The track is largely about his and his mother's alcohol addiction, expressed in lines like, "I got on my knees and I begged my mother with a bottle in one hand, it's one or the other." The track still has that darker energy to it, but it's more manic and heavy, expressing the desperate mental state that they both found themselves in. It's direct in usual Idols fashion, but it's delivered in a much more serious and less sarcastic way, which is honestly kind of a cool change of pace. Applying the droning effects to the guitar and bass once again, When the Lights Come On has a more traditional post-punk sound, which I really enjoy. It's a bit poppier compared to other songs on the record, but those echoing riffs in the background balance it out nicely, I think. The general soundscape here is unsettling yet catchy, and the lyrics are also a bit more poetic this time too, creating a pretty unique vibe for the band. It has a sense of loneliness to it, like you're clinging on to old habits despite them not bringing you happiness, and I especially love the line of, "I want to tear through the sky like an angel flare." It's different for them, but it's a good different, and this actually might be one of my favorites on the album. Car Crash, though, is probably my favorite on the album. It's so interesting in its rambling lyrics, the heavy and repetitive beat, and the off-kilter guitar. The vocal effect is chaotic as hell, and I love how the tension just builds as the verses go along. The chorus itself is a surprising sense of calm in the track overall, and I like how it's a sort of a switch up and subversion of expectations. I also really love the lyrical angle depicting someone who did anything to get ahead, to get wealth and power, but ending up getting in a car crash and realizing that they don't have anybody actually by their side. It also hones in on the fragility of life theme, as one day you can have it all and the next something completely out of your control just takes it away from you. Funnily enough, the more traditional Idols tracks are actually my least favorite on the album overall. The New Sensation is a perfect example of this. The production style fits the more minimalistic instrumentals on a lot of these songs, but when you go in for the sort of normal punchy post-punk tunes, it kind of falls flat. The isolated drums in the verses just don't get me all that hyped, and the lyrics are a lot less vivid compared to other songs, especially when in the other tracks they had the leniency of sort of building up as the track progresses. This one doesn't have that. Like, occasionally a cool riff would be added to the chorus or something, but overall I just don't think songs like these fit the album's aesthetic. Stockholm Syndrome, on the other hand, fucking rules. That hollow guitar has a great sound to it over the shouted vocals and marching drums. The repetition also gives this track a pretty fun bounce without being unfitting for the album's sound. The lighter guitars on the chorus are also great accent pieces to the riffs on the verses. The lyrical angle is also pretty neat, expressing the anger and hypocrisy of two people who don't understand addiction and struggle, viewing them as easy fixes when in fact the problem is anything but simple. The Beachland Ballroom is another one of my favorite songs on the record, and it's probably one of, if not the most unique Idols track out there. It has a waltz-like aesthetic to it, sort of reminiscent of bands like The Good, the Bad, and the Queen. Joe's vocals also go to some pretty charming heights, having a harsh tone but a delicate delivery. The contrast is just super interesting, like a Beauty and the Beast scenario where the big macho tough guy has a really soft and sensitive side and is in tune with his emotions. Those keys also reinforce this emotional vulnerability nicely. I also love how it depicts someone who's so close to realizing and reaching their goals, and they're finally asking for that last bit of help that's gonna get them there. The title track, I guess, Crawl, is another one of the more upbeat songs on the album. This one is a bit better than the new Sensation just because it has more fleshed out instrumentals that reinforce its energy. I still think it sounds unfitting in the grand scheme of things, but I do like how catchy and uplifting the chorus is. Compared to a lot of the other songs on the project, the more traditional drums and riffs are less interesting. However, I do think it is more descriptive compared to the other more standard punk songs on here, so that's pretty nice. Overall, it's good, it's just not a standout. With Meds, I feel pretty much the same way about it as I do with Crawl. Not much separates it from the usual Idols fare, and also it just doesn't really fit on this album sonically. I do like the erratic guitar flourishes and the sax segments, however, it just feels a bit basic for the band at this point. Progress is a track that's light in its airy guitar, but also haunting in its mantra-like lyrics and distortion. It's almost a bit too repetitive lyrically, mostly consisting of two short triplets. However, they are pretty poetic in describing someone realizing how destructive their addictions are. In spite of that though, the instrumental largely carries this track for me, and that heavier riff near the end is also a pretty great addition. I do feel like the lyrics needed to be honed in more on though, the repetition just doesn't really serve itself well to this type of track. The duo of the Wiz interlude and Kingsnake are also another one of my least favorite moments, unfortunately. Again, taking the album sound in a more traditional punk direction, especially on Wiz, just kills the momentum in the aesthetic that we've been establishing up until this point. The lyrics are Idols' as usual anthemic and slogan-esque banter on how we're all just nothing in the grand scheme of things. It is pretty funny, and I do like the lyrical angle, however the instrumental in its bass-focused attempts at getting you hyped about being nothing, it just falls flat for me. The album does end on a pretty great note with The End though. It's a good mesh between the more minimal and drony sound and their more energized styles. A track like this is sort of a last hurrah for the project, as Joe finally reached the light at the end of the tunnel, and as he says in the lyrics, life is beautiful. He's basically making a living, doing what he loves, and the ever-present and in-your-face guitar at the end sums up that feeling of relief quite well, I think. This album overall is a really interesting next step for Idols. Whereas Ultramono was the transitional piece, Crawler sees them exploring the moodier sides of post-punk even further. I do think that they still have trouble committing to this sound though. The best tracks on here were the ones that didn't sound like Idols as usual. I get that it's different, so some fans might not be a fan of it, but I think it was a good different, and I wish they committed to it more, especially in the second half. That said, the more traditional Idols tracks still were pretty good. However, I hope they just continue to take their sound in even weirder and more experimental directions in the future. I'm feeling a decent 7 on the new Idols album. Of course, we do have to talk about album covers on this show, and I really like this album cover a lot. I like the contrast between the warm and cool colors, the warm colors being in the house, sort of a sense of safety, not going outside, whereas the more dark and scary colors are outside, kind of going into the unknown a little bit. I feel like that expresses the lyrics about going out of your comfort zone, realizing about the fragility of life and things like that. I love little spaceman, kind of in an exhausted leaning pose, you know, too. So overall, I thought this was a great album cover. Matched the sound, matched the lyrics. 2 thumbs up. Of course, those are just my thoughts about the new Idols project. What did you guys think? Do you think this is a great new direction for Idols? Should they continue with this and hone it even further? Or were you more of a fan of their traditional post-punk stuff? Let me know. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Ring the bell if you want to crawl over to me. And until the next one, farewell.